Welcome once again to Cinemaholics, the major motion podcast, where we talk about the biggest and best films coming to theaters and streaming online. From the San Francisco Bay Area, I'm John Negroni, film editor for InBetweenDrafts.com. Wait, no, I'm not. I'm not the film editor anymore. I forgot to say. I'm now the podcast editor for InBetweenDrafts.com, and I pass the torch down to John Winkler, who's the new film editor for InBetweenDrafts.com.
That's
anyway,
true.
From Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, he's a freelance writer, film writer, I should say, and, you know, he's the Wolverine to my Deadpool. It's Will Ashton.
What up? Yeah, I mean, you keep saying with these new episodes, the traditional, we discuss the biggest and the best films. I feel like we're lucky if we discuss a film, big or small at this point.
We've been away, and what's the reason? Is it supposed to be all my fault?
I mean, I have tried to keep my schedule as clear as possible. I'm always open to seeing and talking about movies, and then John will be like, I'm gonna go to Florida for 2 weeks and get COVID. And it's like, well, all right, I guess that means we're not talking about Twisters.
This week we're talking about Deadpool and Wolverine. I keep wanting to say Deadpool versus Wolverine. I don't know why. I mean, there is a Deadpool versus Wolverine aspect to it, I guess, but no,
Sure.
It's the third Deadpool movie. We've talked about the second one on the show.
Versus Wolverine, Yawn of Justice. That sounds like a irreverent joke that one Deadpool would make at the camera in this movie.
There you go. You know, he never goes after DC in this movie, which, you know, he keeps it to Marvel. He keeps it simple.
Well, he references DC characters.
Does
I
he?
think he references, I think, Batman and somebody else. I think he like makes an offhand reference to DCU, but it could be wrong. It's been a few days since I've seen this film.
In my defense, this movie makes so many jokes per minute. They're not all gonna land. Like, they're not all gonna hit my ears. I'm just, you know, at a certain point, I'm kind of checking out a little bit and waiting for the plot to keep doing its thing. But yeah, no, this movie, it is cleaning house. It's a huge headwind from Marvel right now. It's been making a lot of money. We're recording this about a week or so, or however long. Like a week since it came out. Just about. Because it premiered on July 22nd, and then it came out in theaters on July 26th. So, $200 million budget, big budget movie. It's already grossed $630 million. So it's the big hit that a lot of us expected. And some people are wondering, you know, is it going to surpass Inside Out 2? I'm kind of skeptical about that. I guess we'll see. Because Inside Out 2, highest grossing animated movie of all time right now. It's like past $1.4 billion. So, Will, remember earlier this year when people were like, movies, they don't make money anymore.
Oh, you're talking about, what's that guy's name? John Negroni? When he was saying that?
Johnny Fresh?
Johnny was like, you know, this whole movie thing? Pack it up. It's all TV and anime.
That's what I said, right?
Yeah, I think that was verbatim
word
what
for
you
word.
said. Yeah.
No, I mean, that's the thing. It's not sustainable. It's still not sustainable because how many movies have come out this year to nothing? And we've gotten just a couple of movies that have moved the needle a bit. But yeah, there are still some problems. You know, we're not celebrating quite yet. We're not doing the Deadpool dance.
Look, I'm not going to say that things are peachy keen all over the board, but I think we're in a very comfortable place movie-wise. Certainly more so than we were in May when people were freaking out. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not as pessimistic about the movies and the movie industry as you are, but you are entitled to your opinion.
Okay, well, you know, I just want movies to keep doing their thing. I don't want anything bad to happen. That's all.
We can agree on that, my friend.
This movie was directed by Shawn Levy, and Ryan Reynolds was, of course, you know, such a major influence behind this movie being made, coming out. Same thing with the original Deadpool movie. Ryan Reynolds, he loves the Deadpool character. He loves playing it. He loves, you know, backing the character and all of these properties. And this is the first Deadpool movie to come out since Marvel bought Fox, Disney bought Fox, I should say. And there's been a lot of expectation behind this of like, all right, well, an MCU Deadpool, how does that work? It's in the 20th Century Fox X-Men universe, and this movie is kind of all about that. It's Ryan Reynolds playing the character. He co-writes a script with a bunch of other people, and he's essentially making a movie about the end of 20th Century Fox pretty much, and kind of, poking his nose at the multiverse and all these things. That might sound like it's a complicated movie, that there's a lot going on and you got to keep track of all these things. Yeah, you do, I guess. But I mean, ultimately, the movie kind of at the outset is like, hey, this is a Deadpool Wolverine movie and we're going to make fun of Deadpool and Wolverine. But here's the thing. If you haven't been reading movie news for like the last 15 years, there are some things that are going to completely go over your head. And don't worry about it. Don't take it seriously. Like, that's kind of the pitch this movie's given out, right?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, we talk a lot about, or maybe we don't, but a lot of people talk about like Reddit movies or like movies that feel like Twitter threads and stuff like that. This movie feels very online in a way that like even I was kind of taken aback. Like I was thinking the same way like you were. I was like, if I'm just like some Joe Schmo from, Arkansas, Kansas, and I'm watching this movie, just having seen the first two Deadpools and not really keenly aware with the ins and outs of the film industry, I'm going to be at least a little confused with some of the things that are going on here.
Yeah, and I guess they try to play it off as like, and I won't give anything away, in terms of the big, I mean, there's big cameos, there are big Easter eggs that are, if you have been super online, if you've been reading slash film for a long time and you've been watching all the Screen Junkies videos, you're going to be like, oh my God, like I can't believe that they, and ultimately, I think that underneath all of the clownery and the nonsense,
and
there is this kind of touching little bit of tribute, not just to Wolverine, but also to the Fox X-Men and that kind of era, of superhero movies. It's a little sad that they can't extend it to other things like Spider-Man for contractual reasons. But, that whole era, the early 2000s, the X-Men movies and all that, and Hugh Jackman kind of taking the role for the first time. And yeah, the movie will, punch it in the eye at the same time and be like, all right, let's have a fight between Deadpool and Wolverine in front of the 20th Century Fox logo being destroyed, which, yeah, it almost like this movie feels a little bit like a funeral, like a eulogy in some ways.
A little bit. I was curious though, because we talked about a little bit, but I feel like we started the podcast kind of on the end of the Fox era. Certainly, I mean, we talked. I think Logan was like one of our first episodes. Yeah. But I don't think we've really talked about like what are your feelings on the X-Men and like Fantastic Four and like other Fox adjacent Marvel films? Do you have like nostalgic?
Like we did talk about this stuff though, didn't we? Like in 2019, like yeah, with like Dark Phoenix.
Okay, maybe we did. I mean, I feel like I've had kind of a tumultuous sort of relationship, to use a word I often use, with the franchise. Like I am a fan of a lot of the X-Men films. I even kind of go to bat for some of the ones that people poo-poo, like The Last Stand and Apocalypse. Like I feel like I'm a little softer on those films than other people, but they're clearly like films of the 2000s, and like they're very clearly of the like pre-Iron Man era where like Marvel didn't really have like a Kevin Feige figure that, I mean, I think he produced a lot of those films or executive produced a lot of those films, but like he wasn't the central creative head. And I think there is a charm to that, but there's also very clearly like a like kind of throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks mentality to a lot of those films that like, for every like Days of Future Past, you'll get like an Elektra or Rise of the Silver Surfer or what have you. And it just like, I don't know. It's probably more misses than hits, but I am admittedly kind of nostalgic for that era of superhero movies. What about you?
I guess I'm a little nostalgic. I mean, sometimes when I head over to the cheesesteak shop, they got FX on the TV, and they got, but the other day they had X2, or no, they had The Last Stand actually.
Okay.
And, I'm sitting there and I'm watching, and, there's the whole scene where you find out Scott's been exploded, and you're like, man, yeah, that was such a different era. The Bryan Singer era, when really, yeah, there wasn't a Feige, but there was a Bryan Singer who was kind of like I guess in that time, like the James Gunn, minus the baggage and all that, but like, sure. Just this kind of like singular director who really wants to like add his own kind of pomp and style to set the movie itself apart from the comic and all that. And yeah, I grew up on all that stuff. I mean, I was at the movie theater watching. I was too young to watch the first X-Men in theaters. I did see it at home. But X2 and X3, I mean, those were event movies, like Spider-Man was.
Sure,
Yeah, like there was like Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man 3, and then the later two X-Men movies. Like those were all like, we're going to the theater, we're going to have a great time. I mean, these movies are going to be just big touchstone moments for us. And then, there were other movies that came out like Daredevil, and then Fantastic Four, and then like kind of like you mentioned, but they're definitely started to become like a clear line of like, all right, so there are some good superhero movies, there are some better ones, sure, and then there are some throwaways, some disposables. There are the weird ones like Punisher that kind of have their own kind of style to them. I was a bit too young for Blade and all that stuff. Like I wasn't allowed to go see that, and we didn't really have it in the house. I mean, I guess, I don't know. I guess the vampire thing turned off the Negroni, patriarch and matriarch, yeah.
To be honest, I've only seen the first Blade. I still haven't seen the second or third one.
Yeah, well, hey, Ryan Reynolds is in the third one.
Yes, I definitely have some thoughts on that. I want to put a bookmark in that, though, without getting ahead of myself.
Now, in this movie, we get a lot of not just Deadpool, who always breaks the fourth wall. And in this one, the plot is around his timeline, his universe being in danger. And there's like this concept around, an anchor being. It's more multiverse shenanigans, honestly. Although I want to give this movie a little bit of credit and say that it kind of handles the multiverse thing better than like Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. I know you have a soft spot for that movie, but I found that movie to just kind of be a little sloppy in terms of like what's interesting about the multiverse. I feel like the only multiverse thing in terms of like a superhero thing that has been successful has been the Spider-Verse stuff. But I think those movies have been so successful, and then Everything Everywhere All at Once was so successful that I gotta say, I just think that Marvel just doesn't have a great hand when it comes to this stuff anymore. I feel like it's been done so well, and they try to come in and do their thing with it, and it's like, I don't care. Like, okay, whatever. Like there's been like the last several years, there have been lots of like hints and teases of like, we're going to bring the X-Men in, Marvel's had this whole thing with the X-Men that it was supposed to pop off as far back as WandaVision. That was 4 years ago. And the whole thing with WandaVision was, it seemed like it was hinting at like, oh my God, that's the Quicksilver from the X-Men movies. What does that mean? And ultimately it means nothing. It meant nothing. So Marvel, I think, has just been kind of like sitting around. We got the big Marvel news, right? That we were going to get Robert Downey Jr. as Doctor Doom. Fantastic Four is coming, even though, I mean, how long has it been? I guess like with the Marvel stuff, it's been a while since Endgame now. It's been 5 years.
It's been a while.
And what do we have to show for it at this point? Like, we had No Way Home, which kind of wrapped up the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies, I think in a fun way. I know you don't like that one. But otherwise, like, we've gotten Shang-Chi, we've gotten like all these like, we've gotten Eternals and stuff. And a lot of it has been just sort of interrupted by like the movies not taking off as much, Ant-Man, and then Jonathan Majors getting canceled. And I'm thinking back, and I'm like, there was like a post-credit tease for Shang-Chi that had Wong, and it had Captain Marvel, and there was supposed to be this whole thing with Hulk, and who cares anymore? No one cares. Like, there's nothing on the horizon for that. Wasn't there supposed to be a Harry Styles thing at some point? This was years ago, 3 years ago. Like, what are you waiting for? Do you want to entertain us or not?
I do. I remember even at the time I was watching these movies, I do think it's funny that like I would see an end credit scene with like Harry Styles or
Kit Harington.
Theron. Yeah, Kit Harington. What's his name from Ted Lasso and Love and Thunder? And it's just like,
the Hercules. Brett Goldstein is Hercules. Yeah.
And you keep seeing it, and they're like, "Oh, just you wait." And
we're leading to something. Right. It's all according to plan. It's like, what plan?
Right.
You don't have one. No, you don't.
Right.
Never did.
And I mean, I do think, I don't know if this was always a plan or if it was like an ADR thing or whatever, but like the movie here seems to acknowledge that the multiverse era, as opposed to the cosmic era, has been if not entirely successful, then certainly just a flop compared to everything pre-Endgame. And so, yeah, I mean, it's, in classic Deadpool fashion, he's kind of, acknowledging the faults of the MCU. I don't think, it's more than like light ribbing, but it is, seemingly acknowledgement of the shortcomings here. And I know this movie's obviously going to like boost their morale a little bit. Obviously, they also had the third Guardians of the Galaxy that was, kind of like the shining beacon in a sea of flops last year for them.
Mm-hmm.
But, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if Fantastic Four is going to take off. I don't know if Blade is ever going to happen. I don't know what else they have.
There's been some, and they had the big event recently, and I'll give them this. I think that Pedro Pascal and Vanessa Kirby, the press they've been doing a little bit for Fantastic Four, like I'm in. I think that they're looking fine together, and I think that some stuff could happen. Sure.
I will say on Reddit, I accidentally clicked a few buttons and found someone at Comic-Con leaked some of the like test footage or whatever from.
Yeah, I saw like a screenshot of like, I won't give it away because people don't want to know, but of the image of Pedro Pascal in particular.
I will say, I mean, obviously, I'm not the biggest MCU fan or whatever, but it looks fun. Like, I mean, if that's the style they're going to keep with it, obviously, I don't think they had started filming at that time, but like it was like a test reel. And they're going for like kind of like an old fashioned like 4:3, very, very 60s aesthetic, like to the point where I'm kind of like, it's kind of surprising that this is Matt Shakeman and not Peyton Reed, based on his like, history with like Is It Down With You and like a few other, kind of novelty films like that. So
I think he's in Marvel jail at the moment after Ant-Man 3. But, that's the thing is like when you're kind of just, director for hire within the studio, like he is, I think that, you start to become a little bit more disposable, unfortunately, because, he's a human being.
Right.
And, he made 2 good Ant-Man movies. You got to give him credit.
But, speaking of directors for hire, we have Shawn Levy here, who is the ultimate say what I need to do and I'll do it director of the 21st century. I'd be willing to argue. He is an absolute journeyman of a filmmaker, but he is someone who has formed a fairly withstanding creative relationship with Ryan Reynolds. Obviously, they did The Fall Guy and then Project.
No, not The Fall Guy. Free Guy.
Sorry, Free Guy. Sorry, I was getting confused because David Leitch did Deadpool 2, and his most recent film is The Fall Guy, so I think an understandable mistake. In any case, Free Guy, Adam Project, 2 movies I thought were stinky doo-doo, but I think you have a soft spot for Free Guy.
I thought Free Guy was good times. Yeah, especially because of Jodie Comer. But no, agreed with the Adam Project. That was, if I wanted to watch a Ryan Reynolds like gin or whiskey, whatever commercial, I would just do that. But yeah, no, Shawn Levy kind of left directing for a while, but produced a bunch of things, some big hits, especially.
Well, he's one of the main directors of Stranger Things, right?
Well, I was going to say, like, he kind of left film, and then he went over to TV. He directed 8 episodes of Stranger Things, and he directed some episodes of like Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt and Imaginary Mary. He did a miniseries called All the Light We Cannot See. And he executive produced some stuff like Last Man Standing, definitely one of his like big, hits. Also like Shadow and Bone, that Netflix kind of fantasy thing that was supposed to be the next Game of Thrones, like the other 20 shows that are supposed to be the next Game of Thrones.
Yeah, you were a fan of that one, right?
The first season, I wouldn't say I was a fan. I'd say that I was, I had fun with it. It had some interesting stuff to it, but it wasn't,
Well, I just remember
Don't get it twisted.
Well, I just remember you talking favorably about it, if that's correct.
And then, before that, I mean, in terms of his movie stuff, he's pretty well known for the Night at the Museum movies. He did all 3. And he also did some fun stuff. I mean, he did some bad movies like The Internship, like, let's just, say it out loud. But then, Real Steel was okay.
I would venture to say that most of his films are not good.
Yeah, Pink Panther, Cheaper by the Dozen, Just Married. I mean, I did like Big Fat Liar. I saw that one in the theater.
Big Fat Liar is the one of his I have the most affection for. Obviously, it was I have to assume it was the first Paul Giamatti film I ever saw. So, however, you think I was watching American Splendor at like 8?
I mean, kind of. based on the
I
other
mean,
things you have told me.
right? Yeah, no, I mean, I guess in retrospect, it isn't that out of the box for me, but I nevertheless, okay, yeah, I will always have to pay my dues to Shawn Levy in some respects for introducing me to Paul Giamatti, but nevertheless, yeah, most if not, yeah, now I'll just say most of his films are not very good. Though I don't think Cheap by Dozen is particularly bad compared to, I don't know, something like Pink Panther 2 or whatever. But yeah, he has more clunkers than hits. But yeah, I guess Real Steel was okay. That was his previous collaboration with Hugh Jackman, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah, there you go. And so yeah, here comes Deadpool Wolverine, which we talked about Deadpool 2. Deadpool 2 I found pretty disappointing. I just felt like that movie, David Leitch, as you mentioned, it just kind of, I don't know,
It
it
was
kind of
fine,
was
I
like
thought.
missing a beating heart to it. I think it kind of
Sure.
fell into some weird tropes. It tried to do the there was the cable thing, there was the kid, who was bad, I guess, and Zazie Beetz showed up and then didn't do much. There were some
Well, she was good in that.
gems to that movie, like Rob Delaney, of course, who comes back in this.
Mhm.
And by the way, where was Zazie Beetz in Deadpool and Wolverine? Why isn't she part of the the inner circle? Did she
I don't
die in the
know.
second one? I forgot.
I don't think so because
Don't
her thing
think
was
so.
that she was like lucky, right? And I feel like she lived for another day. I don't remember. I was wondering where she was, obviously, because I thought she was one of the highlights of Deadpool 2. But I do agree that I thought that movie was fine. I do remember feeling kind of exhausted by that one in a way that I feel like I wasn't tired out with the first Deadpool. And I think a lot of that in retrospect was that, for as much as Ryan Reynolds brought to the role and to making the film possible, I think Tim Miller's balance of comedy and emotional sincerity really, I think, won out at the end there. And it seems like as Ryan Reynolds has taken over more creative control of this property, yeah, he's kept true to the kind of more witticisms and clever puns and irony of it. But it does feel like they are emotionally more vacant than cynical and kind of irreverent. So yeah, it's been a bit of a trade-off in that respect. I have to agree.
Yeah, there you go. So anyway, we get this movie again, and we have some of the old friends coming back. I mean, we see Miranda Baccarin as his girlfriend, who I guess is kind of like his ex girlfriend. They kind of have the breakup off screen trope and do all that. Sure, fine. But then you also have his old friends, like you have the taxi cab driver. You have Rob Delaney, as I mentioned before. And really the movie is just around like Deadpool. Like I started talking about it and then I veered off. But there's this concept in the multiverse called like an anchor being. And so the concept is that if like the most important like person in your timeline dies, then your timeline kind of slowly crumbles away. And so it's a commentary on like how the multiverse is really just a stand-in for, Hollywood, movie continuities. And
Sure.
this movie kind of takes the piss out of that, which I think is the right direction of like, that's
You
all
don't say.
this really is. It's like, you want Deadpool to be in the MCU, but what are the actual implications of that? Like, the movie's literally looking at you and being like, you're going to kill his best friend that you don't remember the name of, John. And I'm kind of like, I mean, I guess, like, what else do you like? What are you going to do? Like, are you going to just do the Fox continuity? No.
Right.
If we were going to get another Deadpool thing, because this movie made bazillions. So like what? Like that's what's coming next, right? Is Deadpool in the MCU. So it's a little bit of like a have your cake and, like throw it all over your face and do all that too.
And call you
But
stupid and then point at the camera and be like, ain't I a stinker?
a stinker. But then the Wolverine stuff comes in a little later than I expected in this movie. He shows up, but we get a totally different Hugh Jackman. The movie comments on like, Logan was so good and we're going to just like mess with his grave. And like, basically the movie is being like, all right, one last ride for Wolverine. Here's a totally different Wolverine. You can still have Logan. Like, that thing is by itself on this island of like, James Mangold made an actual movie over here. But here's our kind of like other last tribute to Hugh Jackman's Wolverine. But this time, here's the yellow suit you wouldn't stop moaning about, John. This movie said to me, it's like, here's the yellow spandex that,
Were you really keen on seeing the yellow spandex? Were you one of those folks?
I'm kind of saying that ironically. I mean, I think that it's one of those things where
Deadpool over here.
A little bit, where I'm just kind of like, oh, that's very nice and sweet. You can do that if you want. But again, it's one of those things where it's like, it's a joke that only really makes sense if you have just been like so like infused with all the like the news of like, when's the Wolverine gonna get his yellow suit, and sometimes they get so close to doing it, oh no, they're not gonna do it this time. And then they also have like some other Wolverines that show up, like with, I won't give anything away, but they kind of just play it that like, here are the other things that we could have done to be more comic book accurate. And it's fine. It's fine. It's fun.
I mean, yeah, it's kind of taking the piss out of the like folks who are like, well, actually, if they were true to the comics, Wolverine would be XYZ, and it's like,
he'd be short,
right?
Yeah, and hairy,
all this stuff. Yeah.
But let's stop dancing around it. I mean, this is a big action movie, lots of exciting set pieces, a lot of cameos as we mentioned, and again, it's one of those movies where it has a lot going on in terms of the in jokes and the inside jokes and everything else. But did you like the movie itself? Well, Ashton, I'm getting the sense, and maybe I'm wrong, that you were a little bit like, Deadpool and Wolverine. Well, you know what? It's not going to be Deadpool and Wolverine and Will. I'm out.
I thought it was okay. I will admit that I think I got more out of this than a lot of the, what is it, Phase 4? Is that the one that's after Endgame for the MCU? I
should know this.
Okay.
I think you're right. At this point, I'm so checked out of the Marvel stuff, sure. I don't remember. I'll look it up.
I'll just say, compared to a lot of the other films that Marvel has produced outside of Endgame, I feel like this is at least a little bit more agreeable. It was a little bit more engaging. That's not to say it's better. It's just that the competition isn't all that much better. But yeah, I mean, I really went to bat, I think, for the first Deadpool, probably more so than I should have in retrospect, just because it kind of felt like a real novelty at the time. Like, obviously, I think I've already talked about in the previous Deadpool episode, the odd similarities between this franchise and Shrek, just in terms of like, kind of the underdog character that found itself in the big leagues. And like, now by the time we get to like the equivalent of Shrek the Third, it's kind of like, all right, well, this was fun and charming for, one or two films, but at this point, it's kind of losing its luster a little bit. Like, we're kind of over it. But at the same time, I do think this movie, if we're just going off of the like comics of Deadpool, this does feel maybe a little bit more accurate to like, if you were to open up, a random Marvel comic and you see like the main plot or like a central plot going on, then you just have Deadpool kind of snarkily commenting on things on the side and talking to the reader, or in this case, the audience. It's like, okay, that feels more accurate to your traditional kind of Deadpool in the Marvel universe, as opposed to, like having him take the center stage. But at the same time, you watch this and there are certainly some amusing and fun, like you said, set pieces. There's an extended scene that is, doing the old boy extended single shot fight thing that, it's not really, unique at this point to rip off Old Boy, but it is a fun sequence nonetheless. And there are a few other moments where, like you said, like the cameos, they do make it a little bit more fun, and it's kind of wholesome to see a few people here, considering that they're, kind of finally getting to pay off like long-standing casting rumors or like delayed production. What's the word I'm looking for? Like delayed films that never really came to be. But yeah, I don't know. It's like amusing and exhausting at the same time, kind of similar to Deadpool 2 from what I remember. But I think this time I was maybe a little bit more exhausted, and I found it a little bit more tedious than engaging. It's not, I don't think, a bad film necessarily, but I think you can only really ride on a wave of cynicism and snark for so long. And I think a third film in the Deadpool franchise, a little over 2 hours, is, I think, just maybe a little too much at this point. It's fine, but I can't say I like had the time of my life watching this.
It didn't take you there, huh? So,
well, that's a reference to the very last song in the film.
It is, yes. Thank you for explaining that, Will Ashton. You're a little bit like Deadpool yourself, even with a red shirt today to record
that's
this.
True. That's true.
So the phases thing, real quick, I did look it up. So The first three phases are part of the Infinity Saga. So the idea is that all the movies before Endgame basically are part of that saga. And then starting, or technically it ends with Spider-Man Far From Home. That's when the Infinity Saga phase 3, that's when that ends. And then phase 4 starts with Black Widow 2 years later because of COVID stuff. And then it goes on and concludes with Black Panther Wakanda Forever. So it's the only phase that doesn't really like have like an Avengers movie in it, which I guess was the point. And then phase 5 started last year with Ant-Man and the Wasp, and it's supposed to conclude with Thunderbolts next year. So then after that, I want to be clear about this. Phase 6 will start, and then it's going to begin with Fantastic Four First Steps, and then it's going to finish with Avengers Doomsday in 2026 and Avengers Secret Wars in 2027. So they're calling these three phases. So the first three phases were the Infinity Saga, and then these phases are called the Multiverse Saga. And I know what you're thinking, John. Why didn't you do the nerdy voice when you explained all this? Why didn't you push your glasses up and be like,
well, the second three phases are called that's the Multiverse Saga.
The reason I didn't do that is because that's Maverick's bit. And, I've been feeling a little bit more like I can't take Maverick's stuff from him. He doesn't deserve that.
Oh my goodness. Is it time for a cameo? Who is that? Maverick Hines.
No, don't get the listeners the listeners who've been with us for 7 years. But no. So yeah, this movie, it's exhausting. That's all there is to it. And I know the old adage, like a movie can be too long or it can't be too long if it's, but that's the thing is like it's too long because not just the runtime, it's the same kind of jokes over and over again. And there's that first Deadpool movie does the same thing. Deadpool 2 does the same thing. But that first Deadpool movie, it's what you're saying. It's short. It kind of understands like we have this lane, of like we're going to balance the heart and the comedy in this way. Mm-hmm. Here's Wade Wilson's character arc. And here's kind of how he uses the comedy to diffuse the stuff going on inside. We have not moved on from that. It's just still that. And it's kind of like it has a different mutation to it of like he wants to matter. And isn't that kind of an interesting character arc because the Deadpool character wants to matter with the MCU? And to them, they were like, that's enough of a thing like that. And people are going to this movie not because they want to feel good about Deadpool and for him to go on a journey. They want him and Wolverine to, punch each other and have ridiculous set pieces. And here's the thing. That stuff is really fun. That stuff is really, I was impressed that Shawn Levy basically like let them do all the action scenes for him because I don't think he's an action director. But there are some decent action scenes in here. There's some pretty shoddy ones too, but they're quick and easy. It's an exhausting movie because maybe because it's a first watch sort of thing where it's going in so many directions and you don't really quite know what you're watching. And like at a certain point, I was kind of like, what are we doing again? Like, isn't there like it kind of reminded me of like Thor Ragnarok where it's like, here's the big stuff. And you're like, okay, well, Thor's got this problem to deal with. I wonder how he's going to handle it. And then it's like, and now we're just going to like goof off and, make fart jokes on this planet for some reason. And you're like, okay, I mean, that's funny and I'm enjoying that. But like, it wasn't there like a whole other thing going on with Thor? Like, wasn't his like homeworld in danger? It's like, yeah, look, Carl Urban, it's still a problem. And I'm like, okay, well, are you going to get to that? And it's like, okay, fine, we'll get to that. Like, that's kind of what this movie is doing. But I think this movie is almost kind of like you take Thor Ragnarok and you mix it with, it's kind of like mixing it, I guess, with the other Deadpool movies is another. There was another Marvel movie I was thinking of that this kind of reminded me of, like if you just kind of like mash them together a little. But I guess if you find some like one of the more like multiverse things, like Multiverse of Madness, I guess. But yeah, it's not that I don't like this movie. I just think that I worry that people will watch it with like too high expectations, especially because of the success at the box office. And, and then we'll do the Rotten Tomatoes game. So I don't know if you're aware of how the critics have been, treating this one. But regardless, I don't know. Maybe it's one of those movies that'll be better to watch the second, third time when I have a better handle. Like I can appreciate and enjoy the things that I did enjoy. Like there's a villain character who comes up who's kind of related to Charles Xavier. And I don't know if I can say who they are or whatever, but a character that I thought was kind of different and kind of interesting. And kind of made the plot go boom.
Yeah, I thought Emma Corrin was a really fun addition. And I thought they really had, some of the highlight scenes just in terms of like actually having some gravitas, but also like seeming like they were having fun in a way that didn't seem ironic or like, cynical in any particular way. Like it seemed like a role they were able to like enjoy and get a lot out of. And maybe, I don't know, just a credit to them as an actor. But no, I thought that was one of the standout performances of the film for sure. And I'm glad you pointed it out.
That's right. Yeah. And they're going to be, so people might recognize them from The Crown. They played Diana, Princess Diana. And then they were also in Lady Chatterley's Lover, fun Mad Men reference, which was a decent movie. Not too bad. I didn't see My Policeman, which they were in as well. But
okay, I haven't seen any of those. This may be the first thing I've seen them in, to be honest.
Okay. Well, you'll probably see them again in Nosferatu. I think they're in that one, if I'm not mistaken.
Ooh, okay. I am excited for that. Yeah,
which they have the presence for, I gotta say.
Yeah.
But anyway, and then again, though, like the most exhausting stuff in this movie for me is the Deadpool of it all. A lot of the Deadpool jokes didn't land for me. Kind of similar to Deadpool 2. There's this thing with like a dog where I'm just like, is this supposed to be funny? Like it's just kind of whatever. Like I didn't. But then the movie's like, but here's Hugh Jackman, and Hugh Jackman knows how to do this role inside out. He's gonna have all these like engaging emotional scenes. Remember Logan? I'm like, I remember Logan. Sure, I'm a sucker for that. Whatever. And then the movie kind of does its thing. Matthew McFadden gets to have a fun kind of villainous role here, and
sure,
we get more of the Time Variance Authority stuff. I know you haven't watched Loki, so for you that was probably like,
no,
what? Okay,
but
that's a whole thing.
I was gonna say, I don't think I've told you this, or maybe I did. I finished Succession the same day I watched this movie, so it was a weird whiplash of watching the final episode of Succession with Matthew McFadden and then watching this movie.
Yeah.
If you watch Succession, that'll make sense, I guess. But yeah, no, that was fun.
I was bummed that they had McFadden in this, which was great, but then they didn't have Owen Wilson show up, which was a little less great. But they had, and I won't give it away, but they did have a character from the Loki stuff who was also really fun, and so they got to show up too in the movie, and so there was a little bit of that. But yeah, of the TV shows, I think that Loki for me has been the most successful. It's just something a little bit more kind of weird and a little bit more offbeat, and it, I don't know, just like has like its own kind of aesthetic to it, where I don't feel like I have to get wrapped up in the Marvel baggage. So it was a little weird then when this movie kind of brings that in, because I'm like, I don't know if these things mesh very well. Like once you actually start bringing in other Marvel stuff, like they pulled it off with like the Loki character, because I think Asgard and all that is so abstract and different that maybe it kind of clicks. Maybe like Doctor Strange kind of clicks a little tiny bit, but I don't know. I don't know if I like my TVA in my movies. Keep it in my TV, please.
Yeah, I don't know. I was able to follow this stuff well enough, not having seen Loki, but at the same time, yeah, I'm glad you get something out of Loki. I'm glad other people can enjoy the shows in addition to the films. I just have no interest in watching them.
Something out of the Hugh Jackman stuff? I mean, you didn't really touch on that too much. But
I was just solely talking about the Loki stuff. But
I know, I was just segueing like a podcast host. Me.
Thank you. Very professional of you. I thought it was fun. Yeah, I mean, I don't think he brought anything to this that I haven't seen him do already. But I was really worried going into this that it was going to be more half-hearted, and that if this was like the last time he was going to be playing this character, that was going to be more of a like ho-hum, like whatever, following, a really lovely tribute to the character in Loki, Logan. But yeah, I mean, I thought he was fine. Like I think he like you said, he can kind of play this role with his eyes closed at this point, and he can bring that gravitas. And I think he works okay with Ryan Reynolds. I was expecting them to have a little bit more chemistry together. It's not that they didn't. It didn't. I didn't feel like it was like. It didn't seem like their on-screen relationship was like as fun as I was hoping it would be. Like the action scenes, like you mentioned, I think were what really kind of popped with them. But like the comedy, as you mentioned, was kind of whatever. And I didn't really, there's only really so much you can do with like Deadpool, referencing random things and being ironic and all that. And then Wolverine grumbling and being like, I'm the failure Wolverine of my universe. And then Deadpool being like, do I smell a flashback or whatever? Like, yeah, I don't know. It was fine.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of the Cable thing too. It's stuff that seems to work better in the comics than these for whatever reason. Just kind of, I don't know. They don't spark quite as much. But it's weird because like it's not. Yeah, you like both characters fine individually, but like as a unit or as a team, there were times when I forgot one or the other was around. And I was just a little bit more distracted by like, there's Deadpool. It's like, oh yeah, I guess Wolverine's there too, or the other way around, I guess. But
I think the Cable stuff worked better for me. Maybe it's because like it was more of an ensemble and it like wasn't reliant on Cable kind of being the heft. Whereas maybe not most. A lot of this movie is just Deadpool and Wolverine interacting together, which is fine for a little bit, but after a while, it doesn't feel like there's a lot of momentum there, and then they try to substitute that with random, surprise appearances and select cameos. But I mean, I think it kind of feels like a big candy dinner at times, where it's like it's all fun in the moment, and I think even Mike Overholt said that to some extent when we were talking to him. But yeah, it in the moment it's kind of enjoyable. You get like a little buzz from seeing certain cameos, but it doesn't feel very filling. It's just kind of just like, oh, okay. It's nice to see, this person, that person, in this role again and all that. But yeah, I don't know. It feels devoid of any real like gravitas, and it's not like, if this is supposed to be like a proper send off to the Fox universe or whatever of the Marvel, it's hard to tell what's sincere and what's like, hey, like this was all kind of stupid, wasn't it? Like even down to playing, like I mentioned, Good Riddance by Green Day at the end, like for this tribute video. It's like, is this sincere or is this ironic? Like I can't really tell.
Definitely sincere, but that's the thing is like the song itself, like that's kind of, I guess, the idea behind it. It's called Good Riddance, but it's being ironic about the sincerity and saying, like sometimes you coach like the sentimentality of like you're gonna miss these people with something a little bit cheeky, like, oh, good riddance, but really you're saying like, I'm gonna miss you, like we had some good times.
Sure, I think that was the intent. Yeah,
I think, and yeah, I'm not gonna say I choked up or anything, give me a break, but like, I'm watching it and I'm kind of thinking to myself like, yeah, that was it's a past era. It was kind of cool to see the different characters, and young Hugh Jackman, for some reason, Fantastic Four 2015 made the cut, sure. But then also, like I'm thinking to myself, like, it's kind of weird to watch like those moments, like a set, on the X-Men movies when you're like, but that was like Bryan Singer, and he was like legit, like, sexually abusing people and stuff. It's like, well, I guess if you're not, that's the thing is like most people who are like super steeped in this stuff are going to be aware of that. So like that's kind of strange, but
Sure. I mean, also Brett Ratner for Last Stand, so it's like, they didn't always have the best people working behind them, unfortunately.
Keep Brett Goldstein away from these movies. They don't have good luck with Bretts. I'm not slandering Brett Goldstein. He rules. Okay, let's play the Rotten Tomatoes game. Will Ashton, we have 348 reviews counted on the tomato meter for this movie. What do you think? What's the critic score?
It's interesting. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure exactly where critics are landing. Like,
you're right that it's not 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, I'm off to a good start.
One down.
Yeah, one down, 99 left. Yeah, I think critics are generally going to give this a pass. Like, obviously, I think there are some who are very negative or disappointed, as you might have mentioned, by it. But I think a lot of the cynicism of the film I'm seeing is more reserved for like the more highbrow, I guess, audiences. I think general critics, I think, are probably going to be like, yeah, it's fine, whatever. So I'm going to say 77%.
So close, Blash. You're only off by one. So you get another shot. Does that mean that you're one low or one high? So is it 78 or 76?
Is it 76?
78. You didn't have the heart. You didn't follow it. But that's okay. That's okay. And, on the Rotten Tomatoes page, Adam Kempenar has a fun little joke about this. He says it's Hall H the movie, which yeah, it is.
Basically, yeah.
Then the audience score, we have 10,000. Sorry, what?
I was going to say sorry, not to trip over what you're saying, but like literally this movie comes out during the week of Comic-Con, and I think they brought out like the cast, including like the cameos, like within a day of this movie being in theaters. And it's like, yeah, that really highlights the Hall H-ness of it for sure.
All right, so then the audience score, we have 10,000 plus verified ratings. Lots of ratings here. What do you think the audience score is?
I think audiences are in line with this one. Maybe not uniformly or collectively, but I think certainly more so than not. I'm going to say 85%.
Not 85. It is higher.
Okay.
It's a bit higher. What do you think? Is it going to be
like 96%?
96%. Yeah, there you go.
Is that right? Oh, wow.
So
on the dot?
Second try.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
96% audience score, pretty high, but does that translate to the cinema score? That's the real question, Will Ashton. The cinema score is also out. What do you think the folks surveyed in Vegas gave this in terms of a letter grade?
I do think I heard this at one point, but I honestly forgot what it is. But if I guess it right, I may have been subconsciously aware of what it is. So I'm going to say that up front, just to be upfront. I'm going to say B+.
Not a B+.
Is it
an A? It is an A.
Okay.
High. Pretty high. Which I got to say, I feel like maybe that's like folks of the audience, you know, being served. Because I know some folks who saw this anecdotally who are kind of like, right. You know, I think that, yeah, there's a wave of people who are like, all right, I'm in, let's watch it. And then there are some folks who are kind of like, I heard this is great. I heard this is really cool. And then they're like, but wait, what? Like, this is kind of strange in a way that they don't appreciate. So, you know, mileage and all that.
I think the folks who either love it or hate it are being the loudest. I think a lot of folks are kind of just like, yeah, whatever, are kind of,
yes,
you know, just kind of, you know, not really bothering to kind of voice their full opinions outside of a podcast like this one.
All right. So then in Deadpool and Wolverine's Letterboxd rating, we'll finish with that. What do you think the average rating is out of 5? We have 638,000 logs on Letterboxd, quite a bit.
So as I was alluding to earlier, I feel like my Letterboxd for this movie is very low. Like I've seen a lot of 1 stars, half stars, all that. But I don't think that's representative of the average Letterboxd. I think there are a lot of people who really like this film, as we mentioned, with the cinema tour and the audience tour. I don't know how that translates to Letterboxd per se, but I think it's going to be a little bit lower than those two scores and maybe a little bit closer to the critics score. So I'm going to say this is a 3.2.
It is higher. It's a 3.7.
Oh, wow.
And I got to say, 3.7 out of 5. And I'm looking at some of like our mutuals and our old friends on Letterboxd, including Abby Olchesi. I got to read Abby Olchesi's Deadpool and Wolverine review.
Okay.
So she said, a thing I love is when a large corporation makes self-referential jokes about its recent history of gray, lifeless slop, while also shoving the same said slop, now in a slightly spicier R-rated flavor, down your throat via feeding tube and expecting you to like it. But hey, Dogpool was pretty cute. Dang, Will Ashton, Abby didn't hold back. If Abby had recorded this with us, I mean, it would have been a bloodfest. It would have been like that Honda Odyssey fight.
Oh, that reminds me. I've already talked a lot of smack on Shawn Levy, and I'm really not trying to like be mean or anything, but I have to say there is a point here where they're in a Honda Odyssey, as you mentioned. They're like driving in the desert. And I was wondering to myself, like, is this kind of supposed to be like a joke that looks like a car commercial right now? Like, is Deadpool going to ADR be like, what are we in, a Honda Civic commercial or something? But they don't. And then I realized, oh, that's just Shawn Levy, like, you know, being a not very inspired filmmaker and just shooting it like something that you would see in a random car commercial. So I think that kind of just shows the level of creativity and ingenuity that
they're talking about, like when they're driving or like the actual fight.
No, when they're driving, but also when they're fighting, it doesn't.
But the fight, I think, is what makes that work for me. Because I think that like being like this big epic Deadpool Wolverine fight, but it's in a car. I think that is the spirit of the movie that I can click with, of like, that's so stupid. And it's like, it takes the piss out of everything, you know, you think you want from the movie. So I got to push back on that one for myself.
Okay. That was just an observation that I had, and I forgot to mention it earlier.
We don't have to fight.
I know. Make love, not war.
But maybe the next episode of Cinemaholics will have a fight about 6 months from now. So thanks for listening as always. And we got more stuff coming out in the summer. And
I want to see Trap. I want to see Twisters.
The M. Night Shyamalan, a new M. Night Shyamalan experience, Trap, starring Josh Hartnett. A movie I had no idea it existed until a few days ago when everybody was like, this movie exists.
You know what movie I really want to see, surprisingly, is Alien Romulus. That looks really good.
Yeah, I got a screening invite for it coming in a couple of weeks. I might be able to check that out soon. And in general, we hopefully we can get another episode up and going here soon. I know you want to watch Harold and the Purple Crayon for some reason. But,
I want to do... okay, I won't give it away, but I have an idea for Harold and Purple Crayon that I think would be fun.
All right, well, Ashton, thanks as always for listening from the Internet California. I'm John Agroni.
And self-referential joke, comment to the camera. I'm Will Ashton, Internet Pennsylvania. You know the deal. I'm Will Ashton.
Superhero Landing.
I'm Will.